Again, I'm Adam Kurtz. Thanks for joining us today for today's Insight session. We'll be talking about Stratum viewer calculations. If you're using Viewer today and you're maybe challenged with some calculations or maybe want to learn some more interesting calculations that you can actually do within Viewer, today is your day. So let's talk a little bit about the calculations and what we can do within the Viewer environment with the calculations. So today we'll be talking about Stratum Calcs. We'll go through a quick review about how to build a calculation, something very simple, and then we'll move on to some more advanced concepts. We'll actually talk about some of those within the PowerPoint here, and then we'll move over to some live examples using a demonstration. There's also a concept of runaway views. So whenever you, sometimes when you build calculations, they can perhaps run too long. And if that's the case, there's the latter versions of Viewer that provide this capability. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And as I said, we'll look at some live examples using the demo, and we'll take any questions. So talking about calculations, whenever you add a calculation to a view, you basically get an expression window that pops up, and part of that expression window is the ability to build the calculation, of course. But if you notice in the PowerPoint here that the expression window actually has different areas that serve different purposes. And so when you immediately gain access to the expression window, you'll notice that um, there's a few things that jump out at you, and that's these folders here on the left side. Those actually allow you to access the different objects within your view. So, in typically you'll build these calculations using measure items, but certainly you can use calculations that use hierarchies. You could, and we'll talk a bit about that. You might want to use certain types of functions, and there's also certain functions that Stratum Viewer provides to make certain things easier and more valid for that matter. So we'll talk a little bit about some of those and we'll demonstrate some of those today. And you'll notice actually on the right hand side, that's where the expression actually gets built. So in this area here, you actually have an area where you can freeform text if you'd like. Also, it is smart text. So anything you select over here, you could drag and drop over. You can select and it will actually fill in the syntax for you as you build your calculation. So here we can see where you're in this particular calculation. I know it's kind of small, but we can see that it's a percent of change function that it's using there. So we'll talk a little bit about some of those functions that are available and how you could use some of those to build the calculations you need. Up on the top are some of the new things that some of the latter versions of Viewer provide. So if you're running older versions, you may not see this in the expression window. However, some of the more recent versions provide the capability of formatting the data right here within the expression window. So if you know that you want to see a percent display mask or anything else like dollar sign or decimal spots for that matter, you're going to want to select the format of choice, and you can pull down that menu there, and that'll allow you to do that. Prior versions, older versions would you'd have to actually go back into the calculation and go into the properties, and there were quite a few more clicks that you had to go through in order to get that done. So that's been improved, enhanced, and as you can see, you can actually knock that out here as you define your calculation. And then over here on the left-hand side, where it says capture an expression, this actually allows you to name the calculation, the column of the calculation. So you can actually go in. This can be free and form text. It also can be smart text as well, depending on, maybe you want to bring in time range here. You can do that as well. So when the time ranges are changed within the primary components of the calculation, the display will actually show what they've been changed to. So that's helpful as well. So again, the caption expression, the calculation expression window, and the ability to build your calculations. So whenever you build a calculation, you will see this window, and this will allow you to build your expressions. Um, and as I said, you'll have different areas you can access in order to build these calculations. Here we see an example where we're actually using product brand and some of the members, some of my brands, to maybe segment or filter in, um, certain types of brands into this calculation. Here we're actually using a sum function to sum together what we call a set. And a set is um, quite simply just a list of members. In this case, we have two members, two brands that we're using, uh, brand number 5 and brand code number 9. So those are the ones that we're actually wanting to see within the calculation. And then anything else will be excluded from this calculation in terms of brands. So this is what we call, an old school term would be called a tuple. In this case, we're just basically trying to marry in a few brands to our actual sales measure. And in this case, we're actually able to use the sum function to do this. So that's one way to actually build a calculation over a hierarchy. And you can do this with time as well. This might be a time dimension where you're filtering on a given year. So that's something that you can actually do when you're using time as a dimension. Here we can see that the calculation renders in the view. Once we calculate that brand example, we can see that based on the caption expression, we can see that the Farm Fresh and Farm Crisp brands were the ones that were included in that calculation. Now that was hard coded. The caption expression certainly was hard coded. But as you can see, I can see now a subset of my sales here. Here's my overall sales for this year. And I can see here that Farm Fresh and Farm Crisp are what they're actually contributing to that amount. And I could do a percentage off of that. I can, if this is something that maybe these are new brands I want to keep an eye on, this is a great way to highlight that in its own column, so you can really focus on it. So that's one thing you can do with a hierarchy. Another thing you can do with a hierarchy, specifically an attribute, an old school term might be called a pickup field or a puff. And you may have heard that throughout your years of using Stratum and Data Tracker. But basically, this is an attribute at the product level. We can see that maybe at product level, we want to use current list price to calculate a list price, or maybe we just want to show it as a value, a numerical value. Here we can see that I'm just basically showing it using the val function. The val simply turns it into a number where I can actually use it as in a calculation. So I could actually multiply this against my units to get a list price, and I would be able to calculate an extended list price by doing that. So bringing in your hierarchies, not only your members, the actual members themselves, or in this case, we're bringing in an attribute to use in our calculation. So either one of those can be used within these calculations. So certainly can be very powerful. Here we can see that if we're just going to do this and we run our view, notice that we will see certain things like this. This is not what we want, where we would use a pickup field or an attribute in a calculation. It will retrieve everything. All of so you really kind of have to basically limit what it retrieves based on syntax of this calculation. Um, this would be not a good thing if, in your environment. If you had literally hundreds of thousands of products, it would return all of them, and that's not a good thing. So how would we clean this up? How could we put in some logic here so that it only retrieves where data exists? Here we can see that we're actually using an if statement. So if we go over here to the if statement, we can see that my if statement is actually quantifying whether there's data or not first, and then proceeding with that calculation if it indeed does find out that there is data within that measure. So here we're just basically using that if statement to say, hey, does this sales units calculation, this is the thing I'm going to use for my product list calculation, or to show at least my current list price. Only show it where there's data for this particular measure. So the if statement is basically saying if this measure equals 0, make that value or that cell a null. Otherwise, go ahead and proceed and display the current list price. Below, we can see the actual syntax of the if expression. Notice that as I pan out here, we can see that that if statement was part of my numeric functions. So if I expand out my numeric functions, I will see an if statement that I can actually click on, and it will give me the default syntax of that function. So I just wanted to highlight that so you can see that the if statement is just basically if then logic, where you can, in this case, we're quantifying whether there's data for a given measure before we proceed with some of the other, the logic, basically. So this is a great way to clean that up so that once you do clean that up, you'll be able to run the same view. And here's, obviously it looks a lot better. You know, I don't have all these empty cells. I have the extended list price, as you can see, is being shown by multiple products, only for those items that have data within my units column, which is basically what we used to quantify that calculation. So again, here we can see that we can clean that up quite a bit so that we're not returning hundreds or thousands of rows or empty rows for that matter, or creating a runaway view for that matter. Okay. Some more advanced calculations. We'll take a look at some of these within the view, but you can do some pretty interesting things. Here we can see that we're actually using a rank calculation. And if I kind of zoom in on that, again, we can see that the rank function is available once again within my sets of functions available right out of the gates. I can actually use that. Here the actual calculation is doing a little bit more. So we're getting a little more sophisticated with the calculations as we progress here. In this case, we're actually doing another if statement to make sure that there is data for that measure. So again, the same tactic here. That we used before. We're using that if statement only, you know, we only want to proceed with the calculation if there is actually data for that particular measure. And if there is, go ahead and use that rank function. In this case, we're actually using the rank function to build that tuple expression, which is basically that sold to current member. So any of my sold tos within my view, I want to rank accordingly. And then I want to order that a specific way in descending fashion. And that's kind of what that B descend syntax means at the end. You can actually dictate how it's going to show and rank. And in this case, we're using sales amount data. That same measure that we quantified up top is going to be used as the basis of that rank. So that's, and I don't expect you to write this from scratch. This will take a little practice. Certainly, you know, this is also in the help text as well in terms of using rank. And certainly feel free to give us a call and we can always help you out in terms of defining some of these calculations. But certainly check out the help text because there's quite a bit in terms of that. Here we can see the rank before the quantifying and after, and certainly the after here on the right-hand side looks much better. We can see that we're actually ranking rows that have data as opposed to ranking empty cells. So in this case, we can see that here we got the ranking going on. Notice that the rank is within the breaks of the division and the grocery store divisions. And certainly we could certainly hide that level if we wanted to just rank it outright. So there's different ways to get what you want in terms of ranking and how you construct the view for that matter. So that's a rank, pretty cool stuff. Again, other things you can do similar to the rank would be a count function. Here we can see that we're using a count function to count number of customers, or in this case, we're using product within our syntax. Again, the same tactic. Do we have data for that measure that we're using for the count? In this case, is units sold. And then if so, then we can go ahead and proceed forward with the count calculation. Here we can see the count calculation, how this one is built. It's actually using a cross join to basically segment and mash together our members and our measures, in this case for product and for the measure of units sold. Again, the same measure that we're quantifying up top. A little more syntax here to exclude empty cells in our count. We certainly don't want to count those. So that's even more prevention of counting empty cells. One other thing to notice here is that we notice how I'm actually making notes using the calculations here by using forward slashes. So I can actually put in some comments to my calculations here as well by using those forward slashes. 2 forward slashes allows you to go ahead and provide any documentation so that any other user that comes into this calculation, they can actually see your notes and maybe provide more information to them as how the calculation is built and what each section does. So kind of helpful there. Again, here's that count. Again, we want to make sure that we stay away from the empty cells. Using that tactic, we're actually able to just count products that have sales data, basically, is what we're trying to do here. So good thing there. Runaway views. So if you happen to have any calculations that do just, they just grind, right? They've got the circle of death going over and over again, and it just keeps going. So in viewer 7.1, you actually can cancel that and then move on to maybe running a different view or going back into the view, maybe editing the view so that you can go in and see maybe some things that you might have done wrong. Again, you might accidentally do something. Maybe you clicked on show all for at invoice level, and that's something maybe you just didn't mean to do. So cancel the view, just make sure that things are running within certain time limits, and then you can just click on that cancel button and it'll cancel the view. And for the admins out there, you can actually monitor long running views by using our view monitor, which is available in the admin tools. And this will display any views that are just running long. If nothing displays, that means nothing has been running very long. So this is a great way to actually monitor from time to time, or if somebody calls and says they have a view that's been running, you can come in here and you can actually see the view and how long it's been running, and you can cancel it from here and take action and make sure that the users are happy with the views and their processing times. Well, that's all I wanted to talk about in terms of a PowerPoint. Like I said, if you ever have any questions or how to perform some of these calculations, feel free to contact me. There's my contact information, my email. You can call us directly or call me directly at my phone number there, as you can see. So feel free to contact me. Let's take a quick look at some of this in action. We've got about 10 minutes here, and let's see what we can do in terms of looking at some of these calculations within the viewer product. Here we see viewer. I'm actually showing a Power BI report that I built using the new Power BI connector. So that's something that you can build these fantastic looking dashboards using our Stratum Power BI connector. So to connect your Power BI desktop to these Stratum views and the views that I have within viewer. I'm going to go into my favorites. We're going to go in and do a quick review on the calculations and how we build them. Here I'm running a view, and I can see it's pretty simple. I've got 2 data columns, and I've already got a calculation defined. It's a simple variance. If we double click on that calculation, I can then go into the calculation expression window, and I can drag and drop that around a little bit, maybe drag it over here so I can actually see the view in the background. And there's my calculation, quite simple, right? I was able to actually build that by opening up my measure items folder. I can see here that pretty simple. I've got 2 measures like we saw before there. I've got 2 stored measures that I can build my calculation. Let's rebuild this just to reinforce what we know. We can click on that, of course. I can put my minus sign in there for a subtraction. And I can click on it or I can drag and drop it. So either way, how you build the calculation, as you can see, its syntax gets filled in as I make my selections here on the left-hand side. How do we want to format this calculation? Up here in the right-hand corner, I've already got dollars selected. Maybe I want 2 decimal spots. So you'll decide based on the display masks that are available within Stratum. What I want to call this, I can actually come in here and I can call it variance dollar. Perhaps might be a little bit more um, descriptive. So I just went ahead and changed that there. Pretty simple, right? I can go ahead and click OK. It'll go ahead and apply my changes. There's my two decimal spots there, and there's my variance dollar column header. Um, Now I can actually use this calculation in another calculation. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to right click and add another calculation here. And here's my expression window. I'm going to open up my measure items, and now I've got three measure items available. The two that we already knew were already there, but now I've got my variance column available. So now I can build my variance percent calculation here by using my variance column as my numerator. However, that's going to involve some division. And I'm going to go into my Stratum viewer functions because I know we've got a divide by zero check, which means that, instead of writing this lengthy if then statement, I can use this divide with zero check and just hand it my numerator and my denominator and be done with it. It's that simple. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and click on divide by zero check. It fills in the default syntax of that particular function, divide with zero check. And now it's looking for my numerator and my denominator. So I want to make sure I select those in that order, because the first one I'm going to select is going to be my numerator. And that's going to be my variance column. So I just simply click on that and it fills that portion into my function. So I haven't really touched my keyboard. I'm just doing this all with my mouse. I haven't typed anything in. And as you can see, I can build these calculations without literally typing anything per se in my expression window if I want to keep things fairly simple in this particular example. And I'm going to also, for my denominator, normally for a variance percent like this, you're going to use last year's sales. And this will actually show your percent of growth based on the variance. So that would be this particular measure here. So I go ahead and I click on that, and voila, the expression has been written. So now I don't really need to do anything further here. It's already going to check and see if there's a zero, and if there's a zero there, it's just going to treat it as a null. As we all know, you can't divide by zero; it's undefined. So in this case, it'll just do nothing and return a null to that cell. Just a few more things, and then we'll be done with this calculation. I want to format this, and we know it's going to be a percent. So in this case, I'm going to use my percent with a comma for thousands, and maybe I want 2 decimal spots for that percent. All right. And then what I'm going to use for my caption header, it's going to be var dollar percent, showing that it's a var based on my dollars, and it's going to be a percent to show the percent of growth or decline. Let's go ahead and click OK. Let's see what we get. And there it is. So that actually looks pretty good. I was able to build that calculation pretty simple. This is a nice refresher on how to build these simple calculations. As I drill down, the calculation stays intact. So I can actually drill down to other levels, and I can see all the different things, and how they populate with my new calculations. If I right click and sort this in a certain fashion, in ascending or descending fashion, I can now segment my top growing these are my customers actually. So these are the top growing customers for my Tip Top brand and my Fresh Vegetables category. Pretty simple, as you can see, pretty easy to do. I can go in and build some of these pretty quickly. If I were to go in and show maybe some of the other, like the customer ranking, let's take a look at that. We can see that we are using the rank calculation here to rank all the different customers based on the different divisions, food service and grocery division. So that's interesting. And furthermore, I can drill on that, and it will continue to rank my data, and those are my top the different product families and so on and so forth. So it'll actually do some interesting things there. If I wanted to hide this level here, I can actually hide that level, and it will do an overall ranking here. So let's go ahead and sort that in ascending fashion. And I can see that my top customers are right here in line with my sales amounts. So again, let's take a look at that calculation. If we were to actually look at that, we can see that, again, there's that quantifying syntax there. If I want to make sure that my sales amount that I'm basing it on the rank on is make sure that that's not null or basically zero. So we're using, again, that if tactic here, and then otherwise we're saying, okay, well, if it's not null, go ahead and use that rank function. And I build in the syntax here according to the PowerPoint that I showed. And certainly, as you can see, it's not crazy to build this. It's not that hard to build this at all. So um, that's my rank, and I'm able to actually rank my customers there and see who my top customers are uh, very quickly. And I can certainly put some traffic lighting rules in there and highlight areas of high rank, low rank, etc. Here's another example where I'm actually using a date field. So in this case, it's an attribute at product level. I can see all my effective dates for all my different products, and I might want to calculate how old they are. Now, granted, this is some old demo data that we've been using over the years, and I've got some products that are really, really old. So in this case, my difference column is actually showing quite a bit of days. So, but let's see how we calculated this. We know that we're using a calculation here, and we know that this calculation is assessing the attribute date here. How does this work? Let's go inside and we'll see. And again, we're saying if that measure is zero, null it out. Again, don't consider it. But in this case, it's pretty simple. We're using a date difference function, and we can see that we're using day as our time unit. And then we want to compare it from to now, right now, to that effective date. Pretty simple. It's really not that hard at all. Now, this could be anything from effective date to maybe inventory lot serial dates, all kinds of things you can do here. I know that one of our customers is in the dairy. We have many, actually, quite a few dairy customers, and this is very key for them because they're, obviously dealing with perishables. So they've built some interesting calculations and views using these date difference functions as well. So but as you can see here, in certainly I didn't format this. This is probably something that you'd want to format as just a simple number, right? But this is cool, right? I mean, you can actually now see it's looks a little bit better, and see how long product's been effective. I can do custom base it on customer's acquisition date. Might be another spin on this, so you can actually highlight and see how long your customers have been with you and been a customer of yours. So all kinds of interesting things to do there. And then the counts. There's my product counts. I could see that, and this is really, well, this is not the counts per se, but this actually shows you that tuple that we built to build that measure over a sum of products, in this case, product families. So here we're summing together certain product families here and just segmenting those particular product families into this particular calculation. So we're just using a sum function to bring together in this case, 3 different product families as a set, and we're marrying that into our sales measure that's already part of the view. And that allows you, in this case, to segment out and see a subset of that sales data in its own column. And you can do that with time, of course, as well. Um, Here, let's do this one here. We can see that we're doing that with just one product for applesauce sales. So in this case, it's just using one product as that. Um, and that's pretty simple. As you can see, you don't have to use the sum function per se. I'm just encapsulating these 2 components, the product family 61 and that measure sales, actual sales. So that's pretty simple to use. If I were to build this over again, that's product family 61. I could start my open paren on that because I do have to encapsulate those, and I can go grab my product family, and it could be really any product family you want to use here. So now I'm actually going in and selecting what product family I want to use. Maybe applesauce, frozen juice and frozen fruit. They could be similar or like products. Um, so in this case, or if I just want to use, I just was going to use one. If I use one, the syntax becomes quite simple, right? I don't have to use that sum function. I can just pick a particular product family in this case, put your comma in there, and then grab the measure you want to build it on. In this case, it's sales. Now I'm going to close out my paren. And so that should be just product family for apples. That should be applesauce sales. And that's all that would be. And that's how you would build that versus having multiple, in this case, product families in that. So those are some of the things you can do. A lot of interesting calculations, as you can see. There's it gets you can keep things very simple, or you can get pretty complicated with it and sophisticated. So it all depends on what you're trying to do there. So I'm going to open this up for any questions. Let me see if I can figure out how to unmute all you guys. Or if you just want to unmute yourself, you can do that too. Anybody have any questions while we're all gathered here together? Feel free to ask any questions. Ask to unmute if you can't unmute yourself. Here, I can see something coming in here. There's a could you show contact? Oh yeah, absolutely. If you want to get in touch with me, adam.kurtz@sylvan.com. Feel free to contact me. If I can't help you directly, I will put you in the right direction. But I certainly I've implemented the product quite a bit. I've trained quite a bit on